Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Matthew Shiner podcast. And first off, I just do want to give a bit of an update about the channel since there has been a general lack of videos for the most part since June, so during the entirety of summer. But I do plan on getting back to the regular upload schedules of Monday and Thursday. Whether these videos will be scripted or not, that is something I'll be working on. But so far, I just haven't written any scripts. I actually did write a couple of scripts, but never got to recording those videos and then uploading them. And then I will get back into this video is unedited. But I will get back into editing videos and putting them together. So, anyways, I do usually on the Mondays provide a reflection on the readings, and so that's what I will be doing today. And I feel like I've touched on this reading before because when I heard it, I didn't actually read or pre-read the readings. I occasionally do, but from Sunday Mass. When I went there, and they started with, it's the account I believe I've talked about before, the Confession of Peter, the scene at Caesarea Philippi. And so previously when I've touched on Caesarea Philippi, I've touched on one of the things that the priest who we would have for Mass, the one thing that he would say about how Peter is like us. This question of who do we say that Christ is asked to all of us. And so that generally led also to the discussion of what was Caesarea Philippi. It was a place with a temple, with the worship of many false gods. And so that Caesarea Philippi is also our hearts, where we have false gods present, and we should go and we should take down these false gods and place in our hearts the true God. And we recall that with Peter's confession, where Peter says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. That's ultimately, we should place that confession in our hearts of who we believe Jesus is. We should believe this of Jesus. But the other thing today was authority. So we had a deacon who did the homily today, and he talked about authority. And he looked back at the first reading, which talked about authority in the kingdom of Israel. And he talked about how, first of all, the same idea of who do we say that Christ is. But then he also talks about the authority given to the church and the authority that we have to be leaders to the world. So one of the things that we discussed, one of the things that you might have learned in your theology classes, your catechism classes, is the threefold kind of ministry of every single Christian, of every single Catholic: to be priest, to be prophet, and to be king. So fundamentally, all of us are called to offer sacrifice, are called to share Christ's message to the world, and are called to be leaders. And above all, Christ equates leadership with service. Christ equates leadership, even in his own leadership, as service. The one who wants to be greatest must first be the least, must serve his brethren. So that's first and foremost one of the things that we see with leadership, is that leaders are not called merely to lord over power over those under their charge. Rather, they are meant to serve those who they are in charge of. The best leader is not one who is a leader, who is one who makes sure that the leadership is the first thing that is known, that makes sure that all those under their charge know, hey, I'm in charge, but rather is one who serves, is one who cares, is one who is merciful, is one who is just. And above all, we are all, in that sense, called to be leaders and called to share Christ's message to the world. And that kind of goes also with the idea of being prophets to the world, that we are all called to be prophets. And the other, in the extraordinary form, the readings center on the 9 lepers. And I went to the extraordinary form, or rather I heard the extraordinary form homily for today, and it was about how there is another kind of leprosy present in the world. Not a physical leprosy of infected skin, of rotting skin, but rather the leprosy of sin. And the priest said that the cure, that the remedy for this leprosy is that of confession, is confession. And so he touched on confession, but he also touched on how confession is the right care for the wounds of sin. How Christ is the true divine doctor who can offer us the proper remedy. But above all, if we want to seek Christ out as our doctor, if you will, we need to be direct with what we want. We need to be direct with what we're asking. He told the story about when he was in Boy Scouts, how he was taking up the rear of this line, and there was a boy behind him in this trail he was taking. And the boy who was behind him, and he just looked back, making sure he's there, asked him once for his neckerchief, asked him twice, and asked him the third time. And finally, the third time, he looks back, and the kid who had a stick and who had his pocket knife and was whittling this piece of wood had cut himself. And in the end, what he needed was not a neckerchief or a bandage, it was stitches. And so, in the end, we need to know, even in our hearts, what the right medicine is. We need to know and ask Christ what we need. And that goes even to Scripture, where Christ says, "Ask, and it will be given unto you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be open unto you." Christ is not far, and he wants to heal us, and he wants us to be made whole and to be made perfect. And ultimately, that is confession. That is why confession is such a very important sacrament, because it is that spiritual healing that Christ offers us. It is the truest and deepest healing that can be offered. And often we don't think of sin in such a light. We don't think of sin as it truly is, as truly something that creates a deep, especially mortal sin, that creates a deep chasm between God and man, and simply how destructive sin can be. We might not always see it, and as the priest said, leprosy and sin is not a leprosy that creates a physical scar, that creates physical rottage, that you can physically see, and you can physically see the damages it has. Rather, it's very spiritual, and it can have damaging, truly damaging spiritual effects. And so that's one of the things that I just like to kind of point out to it. So I talked about the two sets of readings we had with Peter at Caesarea Philippi, especially on leadership, the leadership and the authority that Christ, first of all, gives to Peter, that Christ has given and still today is present in the church, giving a little bit of a different look than the Caesarea Philippi that I've often talked about before, how we are called to tear down the idols of our hearts and build up an altar for Christ, and build up our own confession like Peter's, that Peter is the Christ, the Son of the living God. And above all, I'd like to touch too on what the priest said. What do we say? Are we able to say that Christ is the Lord? And above all, our faith should ultimately lead us to say this, even if in our weakness and our frailty we fail to kind of make this known, we fail to show this in our lives. Still, our faith is that ultimate, firm, rocky foundation that is what Christ made the confession on, the rock that is Peter's confession, that is the foundation of the church. That faith is what we are invited to have and to hold on to, even in the frailty. If we might not be able to say with our hearts all the time, but we can say it truly, though we might not always say it with our actions, with our ways of lives, but we can say it with our hearts and with our minds, that Jesus is the Christ. And above all, the danger, the true illness that is sin, and the remedy that is confession. And so I think these are two great points. Obviously, they're from different things, but I think they're ultimately very important for the Christian life. So God bless, and I will see you next time.